go. Hey there, everybody. It's Ian, and now it is the time where we start to sum up the rites of passage. We've done a number of different readings, 9 in total, 8 which are really sort of small case studies in the rites of passage, and then Van Gennep's introductory reading. And so, well, what have we learned? Hopefully, he says. Hopefully, what have we learned? Well, remember what I said in the early videos, and that the rite of passage, its ostensible focus is on the individual, because groups are comprised of individuals, and it is about the movement of a constituent member in, through, and out of a group. And as that person changes status, they go from having certain sets of rights and responsibilities and privileges and freedoms to a different set of rights and responsibilities and privileges and freedoms. I always think of it in things like, when you're a little kid, you can run around naked a lot, and then when you get to a certain age, it's like you just can't do that anymore. That's just not something that's done for whatever reason. It might be a strange Western psychosis that it's something that you can't do, but that's the way the group operates. You can't do that anymore. And it's just like, oh, okay, but that freedom is gone. But you get so many other freedoms. You get to stay up later. You get to articulate your choices more, and so on. So that sort of removal, and that removal of some things and bestowal of others is, I think, integral to it. So it's about the individual. And as the individual is moving, they are marked as being betwixt and between. Turner's terms. They are marked as being liminal. They are marked as being neither nor. And we have this customary moment that enshrouds that moment of transition, when often often including within that recognition of a transition, a ceremonial separation and then a ceremonial incorporation at the end. And just momentarily go, you are on your own, you are lost, but we are here with you. We are here with you, we are celebrating with you, we've done this before. Don't worry, I'm on it. And so it's about the individual, but it's also about the group, because the same existential crisis of what happens when you remember that you are a bunch of individuals, that your group doesn't actually, in theory, have any presence save for the fact that it is comprised of a bunch of individuals, and that they are always shifting, and that they are always entering and departing, and so on. And so really it's the group saying, no. It's more than that. We do operate as a collective. There is something over and above the sum of its individuals, and that's the consistency through time. And we mark it this way. We remind ourselves that, as shocking as this might be, as disruptive as this might be, even in the most joyful of occasions, this is change. These are all indications of change. The individuals in our group are shifting around, and yet our group still has constancy. Our group still has permanence. Our group still has continuity, and it will persist. So it is the individual and the group reflecting back on itself. So the rites of passage are basically those things that are they are group events, just focused on the individual. And we can go through and look at them in a variety of ways. So we looked at the Simpson article, which sort of talks about those 3 major moments of birth, marriage, and death, and how everything is up in the air at those times. And so the beliefs that are often associated with it, and ways to try and ward off bad luck and bring in good luck. Similarly, luck practices were in the Alp and the Ozdemir reading, having to do with the giving of gold and the use of the evil eye imagery as a way of warding off jealousy and warding off spite and protecting the child. And how gold also, there's a number of different relationships with gold, but and it can therefore be used in other occasions as well. But this has to do with an occasion that is so joyous that it invites the jealousy of the supernatural on. Like, look at this baby. You got yourself a baby. Oh, someone's going to want to steal that baby. That baby's gorgeous. Let me protect this baby with eye imagery and gold. You had Markowitz, which is Markowitz's article was basically more focus on the bar and the bat mitzvah, with a little bit of emphasis on the funeral, but I sort of arranged these chronologically, as I think you probably were able to figure out. But Markowitz, and where the bar mitzvah has this function, but it's what happens when a group that is, for historical reasons at the very least, not active in its customary behavior because of general attitudes towards dropping religious practice, plus the political persecution of being sort of overtly religious, and specifically when living in a Soviet state, when living in an officially irreligious society. And then how that bar mitzvah, that individual rite of passage, becomes representative of the entire group, incorporating not simply a Jewish identity, but an American identity, and an American identity that is as basically about the ability to choose the freedom to participate or not. And so the removal of the stigmatized identity of the Jew that they might have had in the Soviet Union, and the affirmation of this as a positive in the New World. You had Davaloses on the Quinceañera, which is sort of another kind of, well, we can make an argument that it's a pubescence ritual, but more than anything, one of the great things about Davalos is how she complicates it so by not imposing necessary definitions or necessary functions on what it is, but rather looking at it as the young woman's recognition and identification that it is not about adulthood in terms of sort of biological processes, but basically the independence and the fraughtness that independence and being not simply towards the end of adolescence, a woman, a Mexicana, to use Davalos's term of choice, because that is the term of choice of the Chicago community in which she's studying, and all the sort of liminal stages that the young woman is about to enter. This is a ceremony that pronounces that I am about to have a lot of questions, but this ceremony is about me being able to be prepared to answer them, and so they go forward in that way. Godet's pulling on the wedding pulls, the cake pulls, pulling the tokens out of the cake, again with this celebratory nature of the wedding, and how they become special occasions, sacred occasions, occasions in which you can prognosticate the future. But just as much they are, ethnic is not quite the word, but they are, because they are framed as a New Orleans thing, and New Orleans identity is as important as anything else in terms of what's happening. So the wedding is an auspicious occasion, and this is a particular way that it is done in this particular place, and with changes and shifts over time. It has its own vernacular history of how age-old it is. Godet sort of says, well, there's probably influences and so on, but looking at it as a dynamic tradition, in a way that in this city at sometime in the early 20th century, this emerged as an appropriate way of one of the larger complex, contributing to the larger complex of marking the transition that comprises the wedding. We had Edwards in the sugared almond, and how the almond represents the sense of the occasion. It represents fecundity and fertility. It represents innocence, and it represents sweetness. And then how he just takes this triad of meaning and applies it first to the wedding and all its manifestations, then the things that are analogous to weddings. And so the sugared almond almost has become representative of many aspects of joy in Greece. So now framed through a different kind of food tradition, unlike the cake bowl. You had Narvaez's I've Gotten Soppy, the send-off parties, which is about leaving. They're about departure, and they're about the consistency that the group will survive. And what I love about his is how his is about the group surviving as a group. And then we're going to celebrate you. We are going to miss you when you go. We wish you well. You are with us in spirit, and that element of it. And those kind of occasions are limited to the people that they actually care about, are limited to the fellow workers. And so it's framed through this occupational folk life method, and like people who are moving away and we're not going to miss you, they don't have parties. But then the office, the manager said, oh, we got to have a party for this guy, and they do it anyway. So the way that one of the things that underscores is that these things are about communicating to the individual and communicating to that sense of groupness that is defined by the group itself and not imposed from elsewhere. And then you had Hope's one on funerals, this seeming inversion about what we understand a funeral to be in terms of like it can only be a sort of a dour, emotionally fraught, grief-filled occasion. And then we have these funerals that are spectacle by any other name. They are enormous. They are about conspicuous consumption. They are about largesse. They are about demonstrating almost unbelievable levels of wealth, and how they become a counter-hegemonic act. And they become, within that context of a very fraught class structure that is not entirely defined by, but certainly largely defined by racial identity within Jamaica, within the context of colonial legacy and the legacy of slavery. It's a wonderful, wonderful article. So we kind of transitioned from birth to death, and hopefully that theme of the individual and the group and the individual has been inspirational for you, because I'm also taking time to talk about the assignment, the rite of passage assignment. It is a fairly short writing piece. I mean, I think 6 to 8 pages is short. I might be wrong. But where I'm asking you to, now that you have seen examples of either very specific or at least fairly delineated rites of passage. There are some that go into generalities, but maybe it's really only Simpson that does it in that level. Alpenage de Mere, I get, well, maybe Edmonds. There's a couple that are sort of, well, they're regional at the very least, so that they're a little bit big, but most of them are veering more on the level of the specific as opposed to the general. I want you to take a rite of passage that you, if you happen to have experienced it over the course of taking this course, that would be awesome. But if not, something you have done recently, and you have the benefit in this day and age of everyone taking photos of everything and documenting things, so you might have this sort of specificity. I'm not saying you have to use these photos, but they might be triggers for your recollections as you are trying to remind yourself. And I want you to do as thick a description of that event as you can. Whose passage was being marked, whose passage was being celebrated. I know you celebrate even if it was a sad occasion. Whose life passage was being noted. What kind of group are they? Was this a family occasion? Was this a work occasion? Was this a community occasion? How does that group family identify itself? Are there ethnic influences? Are there occupational influences? They exist in context, and they exist in context because if they are about groups, then they are about how the group defines itself. And so, well, how does that group define itself? Whether it uses those words or not. What are its influences? Could you describe the event? And then start going back a little bit in library research if you can, finding analogous rites of passage that do something similarly. And again, you're going to be looking at something that probably happened here or in your hometown or close to you, and it's a 99% possibility that no one has ever written about how it happens in your place. But we are still looking at patterns. And as we look at the specific, we can then pull out and look at the general, because your groups don't exist in vacuums. As much as you might have a family tradition for weddings, that's going to echo through not simply the larger tradition of both religious weddings and secular weddings, and the overlap, the vernacular religious wedding ceremony within however your group defines itself, but popular culture influences and taste influences, and of course sometimes the meeting of two families. And so those are going to be negotiations on how this is meant to be done, all done in a creative way. So I want you to do the thick description as best you can, reconstruct all those things you would need to know. Who was there? How did it get scheduled? What conditioned certain changes? If you could talk to someone, talk to the actual person. Why one thing and not another? Because if you have 3 or 4 completely viable ways of doing something, why was this one chosen? That's always just a good question. Yeah. I think as you get going and as you put it into the context of this, you will see that there is that lovely tension between, it's that classic folkloric idea of type inversion. We have a way of doing things, and that's a sort of a loose set of parameters and expectations, a kind of framework for these events, a framework for a specific kind of events, not simply the structure of the rite of passage, but this is what an Eskasoni funeral is. And then it's like, okay, well, now we have this category of funeral and Eskasoni, funeral and Catholic funeral and Eskasoni funeral and First Nations funeral. And those, that isn't there's a lot of Venn diagram overlaps in those circles as well, of course. But then how was it done at this moment, at this time? Why? How is it done for this person? And often there's going to be things that are identical because you want the consistency. The group craves the conservatism of this thing being done in this way because this thing is always done in this way. And then it's also going to be unique. It's also going to be idiosyncratic in terms of people playing specific roles, perhaps specific music that is chosen, specific the personalization of a speech or a eulogy. Those are going to change. And I'm sorry for using a bummer of an example, but that the same is true for a going away party, the same is true for a birthday, the same is true for a bridal shower, all sorts of things. I mean, there's this is what we need to do, and then also this is how we need to make it unique. And it's just fun. And then just think about it. This person it's their day. It's their special day. But it wouldn't exist. The specialness is occasioned by the fact that the entire group is present to it, or a select number of the group, a representative sample of the group. And sometimes the people who aren't there for a specific reason, because that describes something, like the way there aren't too many men at baby showers. It's like, no, this isn't a man occasion. And that's kind of a fun thing to explore. Explore the weird biases that might be present. Explore the weird. Feel free to explore the weird, because these groups are dynamic, but they're foundational and they're important and they're special, but they're not always perfect. And you can criticize how these things happen as well, without trying to rag on your parents too much. But anyway, so that's it. Write it up. If you're using library sources, which I'm asking you to do, or JSTOR sources, cite them properly. Go to the Writing Center if you're not 100% sure how to do that. Writing Center links are available through Moodle. It's a very short thing. You can use the first person. So many people ask me this, like how you've been boring people have taught you to say, oh no, professional writing never uses the first person. That is not true. Sometimes it does. Sometimes the first person is not appropriate, and many, many, many times the first person is completely appropriate. So anyway, I don't know if there's anything else to say. Upload it to Moodle. You can always be in touch with me. It'll basically be through email, especially when it's due, because might actually be out of town. But it's up there, and there's no penalties for it being particularly late. But due dates are good for you as much as they are good for me. So there it is. It's going to be up, and I'm going to put this up more or less at the same time that I put the Hope video up, so that you can just sort of transition in. So it'll be, yeah, we'll figure this out. Anyway, that's it. I'm done, and I wish you well in the assignment, and I wish you nothing but the best as forever. And I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.